What if the secret to a good life isn't money, fame, or even happiness, but virtue? And what if you could learn virtue the same way you learn to ride a bike, solve a math problem, or play a song on the piano? It's an idea so powerful, so provocative, that it has shaped the very foundation of Western thought. But here's the question that shook the ancient world and still echoes in classrooms and coffeehouses today. Can virtue be taught? This question was asked over 2,000 years ago by one of the most enigmatic figures in philosophy, Socrates. And his answer? Well, it wasn't so simple. Welcome to The Unfolding Journey, the channel where we explore the timeless questions, profound ideas, and stories that shape how we see the world and ourselves. Whether you're a lifelong learner, a curious soul, or just passing through, we invite you to open your mind and dive deep. Let's begin. Socrates, born in 469 BCE in Athens, was a philosopher who never wrote a single word. Everything we know about him comes through his students, particularly Plato. He didn't teach in the traditional sense. There were no lectures, no textbooks, just questions. Endless, probing questions. Through this process, now known as the Socratic method, Socrates challenged his fellow Athenians to examine their beliefs, especially about virtue. In ancient Greek, the word for virtue is erate, which means excellence or the fulfillment of purpose. For a knife, virtue means cutting well. For a human being, that's more complex. For Socrates, virtue was deeply tied to the soul. To live virtuously meant to live in alignment with wisdom, justice, courage, and self-control. But here's where things get complicated. In Plato's dialogue Meno, Socrates is asked point-blank, "Can virtue be taught?" Meno begins with confidence. He thinks he knows what virtue is. He lists examples: courage, justice, temperance. But Socrates isn't satisfied with a list. He wants a definition. What is the essence of virtue? Through a series of questions, Socrates reveals that neither Meno nor himself can clearly define virtue. If we don't know what it is, how can we teach it? At this point, the conversation takes a sharp turn. Meno presents a dilemma now known as the Meno paradox. How will you look for something when you don't know what it is? If you find it, how will you know it's what you were looking for? Socrates responds with a controversial and mystical idea: recollection. He suggests that the soul is immortal and has learned all things in past lives. Learning, then, is just remembering. To prove his point, he uses a slave boy and, through questioning alone, leads him to solve a geometry problem he's never encountered. Socrates interprets this as evidence that knowledge, like virtue, can be recalled rather than taught. From here, Socrates makes a bold move. He argues that virtue is a kind of knowledge. If someone truly knows what is right, they will do what is right. Think about it. When people do wrong, is it because they want to be evil or because they're ignorant of the good? Socrates believed no one willingly does wrong. All wrongdoing is a result of ignorance. Therefore, if virtue is knowledge, and knowledge can be taught, so can virtue. But it's not that simple. Socrates quickly points out a major flaw in this logic. If virtue can be taught, where are the teachers? He examines famous Athenian leaders like Pericles and Themistocles. They were virtuous themselves, but their sons were not. If virtue were teachable, wouldn't they have passed it on? Moreover, if virtue were a subject like math or medicine, there would be professional instructors. But there aren't. This suggests either that virtue is not knowledge, or it's not something that can be taught in the conventional way. By the end of the Meno, Socrates seems to arrive at a tentative conclusion. Maybe virtue isn't knowledge, but something given by the gods, a kind of divine dispensation or inspiration. This isn't a firm answer. In fact, it leaves us with more questions than answers. But that's the point. Socrates wasn't interested in giving answers. He was interested in the process of seeking truth. For him, the unexamined life wasn't worth living. Fast forward to today. We live in a world obsessed with education, degrees, certifications, however. But when it comes to character, to kindness, courage, honesty, can these be taught? Modern psychology and educational theory suggest, maybe. Social and emotional learning programs have shown success in teaching empathy, conflict resolution, and ethical reasoning. But these skills require modeling, practice, and reflection, not just information. In this way, Socrates may have been right. Virtue isn't taught like facts. It's cultivated through dialogue, introspection, and example. Socrates never claimed to have the answers. But by asking questions, deep, sometimes uncomfortable ones, he opened the door for centuries of philosophical exploration. His method reminds us that wisdom begins with humility. And his question, can virtue be taught, remains as relevant today as it was in the agora of ancient Athens. Perhaps the real takeaway isn't whether we can teach virtue, but whether we're willing to ask ourselves what a virtuous life looks like and how to live it. So, can virtue be taught? Maybe not in a classroom like arithmetic, but maybe it can be inspired, awakened, and recalled through conversation, mentorship, challenge, and community. And maybe, just maybe, it starts with asking the right questions. If you found value in this journey through ancient wisdom and timeless questions, consider joining us on more philosophical explorations. Speech Balloon, what do you think? Can virtue be taught, or is it something we're born with? Let us know in the comments below. Bellhop Bell, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into the ideas that shaped humanity. Thank you for watching. This is the unfolding journey, and your journey has only just begun.